Like Jeff, I had my notes on my phone, but then I remembered back there that the last time I used notes on my phone on a podium, my mom called about 5 minutes in. Hey, Mom, I'm kind of busy. I'm sure the meatloaf was great. I swear it happens like that. So, horses are my life. And I like to think about the history of the horse. So for centuries, sultans and kings bred a horse for the desert that was so sensitive and so keen. He had tremendous endurance. He had a larger than normal heart and this streamlined body and fine bones. And half a planet away, these knights rode these brave, muscular horses into battle through dense forests and over hills of mud and rocks. And one day, humans, and you know how this story goes, they put these two horses together. And what we got was the Thoroughbred. We got a horse so heart-stoppingly beautiful, he launched an avalanche of art. A horse with mind-bending speed that we'd never seen before. The Thoroughbred horse redefined the horse in sport. He also redefined the face of war. So fascinated, we bred the best to the best to the best to the best for centuries. And we created possibly the world's most intense genetic experiment when we started to register our thoroughbreds. We bred for speed, to be sure. We bred for balance and symmetry. But even from the beginning, we bred the Thoroughbred for heart. We bred this horse that was willing to give us everything, to lay down everything for what we wanted. And when he did, and when she did on Saturday, anybody who watched Winx win her 4th straight Queen's Plate, if your heart was not lifted, if you didn't cry watching it on your phone in your kitchen Saturday morning, that's a Thoroughbred. So when we started Square Peg Foundation back in 2004, we set out to use these gallant-hearted Thoroughbreds to serve people who suffer, primarily people with autism. And boy, did we take heat for it. People couldn't figure out why we would choose to use Thoroughbreds. They're too flighty, they're too tall, they're too high maintenance. And the reality is, all those things are actually true. So why the heck would we actively choose to use these horses? Are you with me? Or are you handicapping the classic because it's Mendelssohn? Anyway, so why would we choose to use these horses? And there's a really good reason. Horses, like humans, are profoundly social beings, not just very sound beings. Oh, look, something to hold on to. They're profoundly social beings. And we all know the suffering that happens in our lives when we are separated from our social networks. So much so that Mother Teresa of Calcutta said something that changed my life. She said, "The greatest poverty in the world is not hunger." Remember, this was the lady scooping babies up off of the streets of Calcutta. She said, "The greatest poverty is not hunger. The greatest poverty is loneliness and a feeling of being unwanted." That's how important our social networks are. Autism, without going into way too much detail, is primarily an issue with social cues and social connections, coupled with often crippling anxiety. Thoroughbreds are connected to humans from the moment of conception. A Thoroughbred doesn't know life without human in the picture. His ancestors don't know life without a human in the picture. Horses are part of his survival, his family, his whole social network. So tell me why it's strange to put someone who's struggling with social connection together with a being who doesn't know anything else. Together with a being who can teach that person what it's like to be revered and valued. So I'm going to level with you. I came here with a little bit of an agenda, and it has nothing to do with racehorses. We have a mantra at our farm, and it's 3 simple words, and this is the takeaway that I wish that you may take away. And those 3 words are always assume intelligence. Anytime you're dealing with someone with a neurological struggle, whether it's autism, a stroke victim, Alzheimer's, dementia, PTSD, you have a choice when talking to that person. And most of the time, we do what we think is okay, and we talk to people like this that are having a neurological issue. And you see me building a wall between us? Don't you want to punch me? Yeah, because I'm talking down to you. Instead, we can choose to talk to someone as a human being worthy of respect. And when you do that, you risk nothing. You risk absolutely nothing. If you're understood, you're understood. If you're not, you're not. But what you may be doing is giving someone the most precious gift that a human can give to another human, and that is the gift of dignity. I'm going to tell you a few stories from the barn about how deep this connection with these people and these horses really are. And most of these stories are what happens when I personally forget this very simple lesson of always assume intelligence. Benny was about 5.5, autistic, nonverbal, very hyperactive. He would bolt into really dangerous places all the time, always on the run. So we had decided that when Benny was at the barn, he would physically be in our arms all the time in order to keep him safe, including when he was on the horse, he was in our laps, in our arms, which worked out well because all Benny wanted to do was canter and carry a pool noodle. So it was my turn to hold on to Benny, and I was leaning against our office trailer, which was a big metal building. And all the other kids, and on that metal building were those little Fisher-Price fridge magnet letters. Do you remember those? You know, the ones that you wrote the dirty words and got your brother blamed for it? Stacy, you did that. I know you did that. Anyway, we had those letters, and Benny was futzing with those, and we had a whiteboard, and we had all the kids' names on one side of the whiteboard, and the horses' names on the other. And the kids were fighting because Ferris wanted to ride Cometa, but she rode Cometa yesterday because Aiden really wanted to ride Tina, and it went on and on and on. And Benny was futzing with the letters, and I was surfing the chaos. That's our usual barn thing. And one of my staff walked by, and she goes, "Oh my God, Joelle, look." And I looked, and Benny had taken the letters and very clearly written Ben and Bob, the horse he wanted to ride. We had no idea that Benny was literate. We had no idea he knew exactly what was going on. And he managed to find a way to self-advocate. Always assume intelligence. I've got this Fleet Alex gelding, and to be honest, I'm the only one who likes him. He's kind of a jerk. But he's beautiful, right? Big bay horse, 4 white socks. He lost an eye as a 2-year-old, and he bites people. So I keep him in a corner of the barn because he's the trainer's baby. We all have that horse. And this family pulls up, and they hop out of their car, and they've got a 50-pound box of carrots and a 50-pound box of apples. And they did this all the time. We used to call it the feeding frenzy. Right? So there's kids and apples and carrots and goats running everywhere, and it's a really good time. And I'm sitting on a tack trunk with Mom. We've got this, our main barn is a shed row barn with 9 stalls in it. And I look over, and this autistic girl has built this perfect volcano of carrots underneath the Fleet Alex gelding. I said, "What are you doing, Ava?" She said, "Carrots are good for your eye, Joelle, and I'm healing your horse for you." I'm not crying. You're crying. So we've got these 2 little girls, well, actually 2 young women riding. One is this very precocious 7-year-old, and one is 22. And the 22-year-old, when she was 19, she sat down with her parents at her educational review meeting, and the school told her parents that she was incapable of learning, and that her only educational opportunity was adult daycare. When we heard that, I gave her a job. She's at Square Peg Ranch every day, Monday through Friday, from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This person who is incapable of learning turns out horses, lunges thoroughbreds, helps with feeding, cleaning, tack cleaning. She's an important part of our social fabric. And she's riding with her 7-year-old buddy, and her 7-year-old buddy says, "Do you have Williams syndrome?" 22-year-old says, "No." She says, "Well, my sister has Williams syndrome, and I thought that's what you had." "Do you have cerebral palsy?" 22-year-old says, "No." She says, "Well, I have cerebral palsy, but my mom says it's not that bad." "What do you have?" 22-year-old thinks, and she says, "I have Barbie dolls. Do you want to play with them?" This young man is about 19 now, with his amazing eye-hand coordination. Comes to the barn twice a week. He has about 20-25 words in his vocabulary, and he won't touch the horses without gloves on. But I'm thinking about his eye-hand coordination, and he's a boy. So I hand him a polo mallet, and I put him on this Fusasachi Pegasus horse that we have that will do anything. And his mom, who's this great friend of mine, says, "Joelle, I knew you were crazy, but is giving my sometimes violent son a 54-inch hammer a good idea?" I said, "I don't know, let's see." In about 10 minutes, he could coordinate moving his horse and dribbling the ball on both the off and the near side. And if you've ever tried it, it's not easy. And we were pretty excited. He was excited, I was excited. And he got excited, and he swung the mallet, and he clocked, you can't take me anywhere, and he clocked this horse in the head, not too hard. But, and I thought, holy moly, here we go. Here goes the violence. Because he threw the mallet, and then this kid who would not touch the horse without gloves on wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, buried his face in his neck, and said, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Sorry is not a word that we knew was in his vocabulary. Got a little guy that would show up at the barn, and we never knew when, because it turned out it was about the only place he could go. And Mom would show up from another night, a sleepless night, where he may have been running down the street naked, locking himself in the bathroom, and she would just open up the car door, and she would crawl in our porch swing and fall asleep. And this kid was tough. And he didn't seem to be connected to the horses. He liked darting in and out of things, climbing over things, throwing helmets off a cliff. That was fun. He would go in the horses' stalls, and he would stick his face in the water, and he would slurp water. And then he would grab a fresh manure ball, and he would throw it in the horses' water. There was a lot of cleanup that happened after this kid would leave. And one day I was frustrated and tired and understaffed. And I went over to tell Mom that maybe we needed to have a conversation about some other places he might go. And I walked over and I said, "You know, I'm not really sure that he's that involved in the animals." And she says, "Wait, you don't know?" I said, "No, what?" Now remember, my main barn is a 9-stall shed row barn. She said, every time he comes home from the barn, he goes to his box of plastic horses, and he lines them up by color and size, names every single horse in order, and cannot and will not go to sleep until his horse friends are watching him. Always assume intelligence. Had a little guy at the barn who was selectively mute. Selective mutism sometimes goes with autism, sometimes goes with trauma. But it's when speaking to someone, except in a place where they feel comfortable, is so terrifying that they completely clam up. I don't have this problem. And this little boy only spoke at home with his family. He went to a school for kids with severe behaviors, and the school was convinced that he didn't speak at all. They challenged this family to send a video of him actually speaking. When he would come to the barn, he started by mumbling to the horses, And then he really attached to one of our instructors, and they would talk as long as they were both riding horses and facing forward. And in just a couple of months, you would find them chatting about global politics, Pokemon Go, and his favorite subject, dog breeds. Another little boy who also went to the same school for kids with severe behaviors looked on our schedule and saw the selectively mute boy's name and said, "He rides here too? And we ride the same horse?" I said, "Yeah." So he goes to school the next day and he draws a picture of this horse they ride. And he slips it to the selectively mute boy. On the playground, the selectively mute child goes by him and goes, "Hi," and keeps going. The other kid was so excited. As soon as he got home, he called me on the phone. He said, "Joell, he talks. He talked to me." So we were all pretty excited. And I got on the phone with both sets of parents, and we set up a play date where both of the boys could be together at the barn and could ride together. And because our staff is amazing, they put together this really elaborate trail ride and treasure hunt with clues where they would ride around the farm, pick up their clues, and at the end, there would be a party with both of their favorite snacks. The selectively mute child didn't just participate. He read the clues aloud for the camera in front of volunteers, staff, this other child. It was the beginning of him speaking outside the home. So all of this that I've talked about, remember how I talked about this always assume intelligence bit? Well, I don't know much, but I've put these kids together with these horses for about 15 years now, and I watch this exchange of dignity that goes on between them. And I realized that we've done everything we ever sought out to do when we bred these thoroughbreds for heart, right? You've got these animals with such tremendous generosity to accept the human in front of them, day in and day out. I don't apologize anymore for choosing thoroughbreds for our program. It wasn't too long ago that this term aftercare didn't exist. And when the financial markets collapsed in 2008, I had 16 horses to feed. I had a landlord who knew he could get a whole lot more money from a Woodside Hunter jumper than he was getting from a nonprofit, soaring hay prices, and the phone was on fire with people begging us to take horses that they couldn't afford. If it wasn't for aftercare charities and funding sources, if it wasn't for racehorse owners and breeders and fans, Square Peg never would have made it through that financial crisis. And we didn't just make it, we're thriving. I just got back from Ireland, where I was invited to come and help a program there that is doing everything I ever dreamed of in my wildest dreams in services for people with autism using horses, and they're doing it beautifully. They're going to serve 10,000 individual events, 10,000 service user experiences in 2018 alone. And just for reference, we're a pretty big program, and we're going to do about 2,500 this year. And he's got a plan to replicate it 8 times over, all over Ireland. We're going to create jobs for scores of thoroughbreds to deliver life-changing services. I've been working with the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Oh, and the thing I should tell you about the program in Ireland, their biggest funder, their founding funder, a racehorse owner. In Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy, I went in and I trained their volunteers and their employees in how to work, in how to help them improve their program with veterans. And it's the most amazing thing ever. And guess who their main funding is coming from in leadership? A racehorse owner. We're looking to replicate this model in Canada, in Maryland, and I may have finally found the right partner to help us find a property in Los Angeles, an area that's been begging us for services for almost 10,000 years. 10,000 years? 10 years. It seems like 10,000 years. So I'm here to thank you for caring about aftercare and about this movement. When we started all of this in 2004, my husband's a pretty smart tech guy, and he sought to find us people to mentor us that were changing the world, people that we could emulate. And we get this invitation to have dinner with some heroes of ours. Jerry and Lilo Leeds were in their 80s then. They had both escaped Nazi Germany. They built a billion-dollar company in New York, sold it at the top of the market, and spent the rest of their lives changing education in the most gnarly inner-city high schools you can imagine. And we were so excited to sit down and have dinner with them, and I chatted their ear off. And I was telling them all of our plans, and then I realized they were both looking down at their plates and they weren't moving. And I thought, I've either exhausted them or I've bored them to tears. And Jerry Leeds looked up at me, and he'd recently had a stroke. And he leaned across the table, and he said, Joelle, what you're doing is too important. So don't you dare start a program. You start a movement. I didn't start the aftercare movement, but boy, am I happy to be on this train. And boy, am I grateful that you guys are here. Thank you.